So Mary Poppins was a humongous success for Walt Disney, not just commercial success, but critical acclaim as well. And it was actually nominated for 13 Academy Awards the next year. And of those 13, it actually won 5. Best Actress for Julie Andrews, Best Film Editing, Best Musical Score, Best Visual Effects, which is one of the reasons why we're here, of course, as well as Best Song. So where do you go from cute little singing animatronic birds? Well, of course, to man-eating death machines, naturally. So in 1975, Steven Spielberg and composer John Williams scared the world out of the water with a mechanical shark that barely worked enough to get on film. In 1974, Spielberg was a relatively unknown Hollywood figure. He had a lot of trouble getting big stars to his projects. He did a couple episodic TV stints, and a successful made-for-TV movie named Duel, which is a great TV movie. You should definitely check it out. It's just basically about a guy who has a huge Mack truck running him off the road. That's basically the entire film, called Duel. And maybe you've had that experience with trucks getting a little too close to your car that you could relate to the movie. It's great. Check it out. Starred and really nobody that made a big name for themselves. He also had a fairly successful movie with Goldie Hawn called The Sugarland Express. But Jaws, this is the actual poster for the movie that came out. Duel, here it is, starring Dennis Weaver. The killer's weapon is a 40-ton truck. It's a great movie. Check it out. He had a pretty good success with The Sugarland Express. This is before Jaws as well. This is basically like his second film. But he wasn't exactly a household name. And along comes Universal Studios, and Universal Studios was eager to move the highly acclaimed Peter Benchley's best-selling novel to the big screen, Jaws. So it was a book first. And Universal gobbled it up and said, we're going to make this into a great movie. So eager that they didn't even wait for a finished script for the movie before the cameras started rolling on the film. Never a good idea. In fact, so much of the dialogue was actually missing that Roy Schneider, who you see here, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw, the 3 main leads of the film, basically ad-libbed a huge chunk of the movie. They made it up as they were going along, including the famous line, "You're going to need a bigger boat." That was just made up on the spot by Roy Schneider. So good for him. Maybe he should have got a writing credit. Part of the reason that the cast had time to improvise was because the robotic shark basically kept breaking down. Here they are goofing around with it on set. And it halted production constantly. Named Bruce, like I mentioned earlier, named after Spielberg's lawyer, the shark relied on a complicated series of pneumatic pumps that kept getting fried by the seawater. Okay, so breakdowns of the shark basically became a daily occurrence. There's Steven, a very young Steven Spielberg, goofing around with the animatronic right there. 3 versions of Bruce, the pneumatic prop shark, was constructed, actually. One was a full-body prop that was towed with a 300-foot umbilical cable. And the other 2 were called platform sharks. And these were attached to, you can see it right there, 12-ton steel platform that basically rolled along on the sea floor. 13 technicians in scuba gear operated controls for this animatronic monster. The entire miserable experience of going 200% over budget to the tune of $9 million back in 1974, released in 75. Near mutiny by the film crew and a nervous breakdown on the very last day of shooting was smoothed out nicely by the fact, there's the shark with, in shallow water. All of that trouble was smoothed out nicely by the fact that it was a mega smash and it brought in $470 million worldwide. In today's dollars, that would be the equivalent of making about $2 billion for the movie. Not too shabby, considering it cost you $9 million. Pretty good rate of return, right? And so what we're looking at right here are the lines going all the way around the block to get into the movie. And if you're wondering where the term blockbuster came from, it came from the fact that, nowadays you just go online, you buy your tickets, you show up on, at a certain time, and waiting in very, very long lines is kind of going away. However, if you wanted to see a film, you just had to wait in a very long line and wait for all the movies to show, and finally you get your way in, and you may be waiting in a line that wraps all the way around the block. That was the case for Jaws, as you can see right here. Is the case for Star Wars. It was the case for The Godfather. And that's where the term came from. If a movie is incredibly successful, they would say it's a blockbuster because the lines are around the block to see it. There's actually a full-length feature making of the movie, and it's called The Shark is Still Working. If you haven't seen Jaws, that should definitely be on the top of your to-do list for cinematic education. But the feature-length documentary called The Shark is Still Working, and that kind of goes through the whole trials and tribulations of going through and trying to make this thing work. It's kind of funny that when we get into about 20 years later, when we get into another one of Steven Spielberg's animatronic movies, he said, I'll never work with water again. I'll never work on the water again because Jaws was such a miserable experience. However, he kind of made a couple of the same mistakes 20 years later when it comes to a certain dinosaur, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But let me show you the trailer right now for The Shark is Still Working.
There is a feature alive today that has survived more than 3 decades of motion picture evolution without change, without question, and without equal. It lives to thrill, a timeless cinematic classic. It still attracts and captivates millions. It is as if Hollywood created the perfect motion picture experience and called it Jaws. The year was 1975. Audiences around the globe bore witness to the box office phenomenon that changed it all.
This movie crashed into people like a speeding truck.
Jaws, the terrifying blockbuster film by director Steven Spielberg, sent shockwaves throughout contemporary culture. Shockwaves that continue to reverberate today.
I still get a little nervous in water, being like, is there a shark in here?
Now, an all-new documentary explores the amazing endurance of this groundbreaking film. The Shark is Still Working. We'll take you on a journey back to the beginning.
Making Jaws was the toughest filmmaking production experience I've ever encountered.
It's not going to be pleasant.
The shark is not working.
Nothing's ever come close.
We're all living very frustrated summer. Our fear was that the shark wouldn't work on the screen.
To the extraordinary impact of Jaws on society.
I cannot tell you how many people have said, because of Jaws, I will not go in the water to this day.
Entertainment.
Anyone who's around my age who's in this movie business always kind of cites Jaws as the movie that made them want to get into movies.
And shark science.
I have heard from a bunch of marine biologists that the number of people interested in the study of sharks has doubled or tripled since Jaws was released.
To the picture's unquestionable legacy that abounds through the passionate expression of its fans.
I still remember the first time that I saw Jaws in the theater and how it affected me. It absolutely changed the direction of my life in one night.
Exclusive interviews with Steven Spielberg, Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Peter Benchley, and many others give insight into what made this beleaguered fish story one of Hollywood's critically acclaimed and enduring cinematic successes. Just when you thought you knew everything there is to know about Jaws, now comes The Shark is Still Working. The impact and legacy of Jaws. see it before you watch Jaws again.